Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. My name is Helena Gelman, and on behalf of DU History, in conjunction with DU Eastern European Society and the Department for Russian and Slavonic Studies, I'm delighted to welcome you to Estonia Identity Narratives in the Post-Soviet Era from the 1990s. Just a safety thing, the emergency exits are behind you, near where you came in. And before I introduce this evening's speaker, Connor Daly is going to say a few words about the lecture series.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third of our lectures in the series, Understanding Europe's East. And I'm literally going to spend less than a minute explaining to you the genesis of the series and what we're trying to do. In our first lecture on Bulgaria, Dimitar Kambourov explained to us how the identity of the Bulgarian people was a tension between pride and shame, and that he recommended a resolution around quiet dignity. In the second lecture last week from Gezim Visokor, we learned how the strivings of Kosovo to achieve genuine independence have been thwarted by Serbia's reluctance to acknowledge its past, particularly the past since the 1990s. And today we're going to be hearing about Estonia from Dr. Heiko Pääbo, a country where two traditions, two distinct ethnic groups coexist and negotiate a shared future. And again, one of the most important sub-themes of this series is a tension between nation states on the one hand and empires, and the overlap between the peoples who lived in the old empires and who come to live in the nation states, some of whom may have been transported into those regions as planters, as settlers, as industrial workers. And we know in that concept in this island. So it's a thing we're going to be coming back to in future lectures, next week on Romania, the following week Transnistria, Moldova, and Romania. And of course, the large context to all of this is our large neighbor to the east, Estonia's large neighbor to the east, who has in recent years rediscovered an interest, has rekindled an interest in its old imperial borders. Putin's Russia borders, of course, on Estonia, and the subject of today's lecture is Estonia. So I look forward to hearing more about identity narratives in his country from Heiko Pääbo, 30 years on from when the Soviet Union dissolved.
So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Heiko Pääbo, the program director for the Central and Eastern European, Russian and Eurasian Studies at the University of Tartu. He's widely published on domestic and foreign policy in the Baltics, national narrative, history, and international affairs. He's going to talk for around 40 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A. So thank you so much.
Tere tulemast Eesti identiteedi loengule. No worries, the lecture will be in English, but today is Estonian Mother Tongue Day, so therefore I started with a small greeting in Estonian. So welcome to this lecture, and I'm very glad for this invitation to speak about Estonia and Estonian identity narratives. And Connor also very nicely introduced this context, in which context we explored these narratives. So basically, what I'm going to present is part of a bigger research project, which looks Estonian identity narratives from the 90s until 2000s. So that in that sense is one part or one piece of the piece which is already made, so what is ready. And I will introduce these main findings, though I'm not going too much into details of the research process and everything. I rather try to make it more digestible for a broader audience. I was also told that probably the audience is not so familiar with Estonian history, so a little bit contextualization of Estonian history. Estonia is a state which is independent since 1918. And this year we celebrated 106th anniversary of Estonian independence. Though, of course, we were 50 years occupied, and it is this kind of interruption. And what the lecture is going to then explore is the impact of this interruption. But Estonia, when it was established as an independent state, it was a democratic country until 1930s. And as many European countries, Estonian democracy did not survive the Great Depression and economic crisis. And in the 1934, Estonia became a dictatorship. And when the Second World War started, then Nazi Germany and Soviet Union divided territories that remained between them, starting from Finland up to Romania, and Estonia was given to Soviet Union, which meant that Soviet Union occupied these territories, started implementing Sovietization, and when Nazi Germany invaded Soviet Union, then it also occupied Estonian territory. And in 1944, Estonia was reoccupied again by the Soviet Union, and the Sovietization policies continued. In 1991, Estonia finally restored its independence, and this restoration principle is also this kind of crucial cornerstone of Estonian statehood. It's very essential that it's not a new state that emerged in 1991 on European map, but it is a restored state, because Estonian exile government abroad also maintained this continuity of the state. And 2004, we became the member state of NATO first, and a few months later also European Union, so that together with Ireland we are part of European Union. So this is this kind of background. On the map you can also see where Estonia is located, and as also Connor said, yes, we share border with Russia. Also, as it was pointed out, Estonia has this kind of two major communities. One is, or the bigger proportion of the society is Estonian speaking or native Estonians, and the second largest community is Russian speaking community. And of course, now more and more different ethnic groups also have come to Estonia, and Estonia is also quite a multi-ethnic society. But what I wanted to point out here with this graph, that this ethnic composition of Estonia has very rapidly changed. Actually, with a very short period, Estonia became from relatively homogeneous country to almost 60-40 proportion, this kind of heterogeneous society. And also what is crucial to keep in mind, that not all Russian speakers in Estonia are ethnic Russians. What Soviet regime did, the people who came during the Soviet time, they were very efficiently Russified. They lost their ethnic, sometimes even their mother tongue, and there are this kind of Russified community in Estonia. And what I'm going to present is then the 90s is the period when Estonia faced transformation from the Soviet system to a democratic society. And it was accompanied with this kind of three-layer transformation. So that first there was political transformation. We needed to establish new constitutional order because the Soviet constitutional order did not fit for us. Then from one-party system to multi-party system, which created a lot of instability in political landscape. Also building up new institutions, particularly, for example, as being occupied by the Soviet Union, we did not have our own foreign or defense or security institutions. They were all run from Moscow, and we needed to build up these institutions. So that this is this political dimension. Then the second one is economic transformation, because Estonia, being part of the Soviet Union, was planned economy, and we built up liberal market economy, also privatization. As much as Estonian statehood was built on the restitution principle, then also the old property rights were restored, so that the peoples whose property was nationalized by the Soviet authorities, then they got their property back, and this created certain feelings of inequality and social tensions, which maybe some remnants are still existing in Estonian society. And also social transformation. Of course, the social transformation itself is much broader topic, but as much we are focusing here on these two communities that we have in Estonia, then I put the emphasis here on the nation building. And also the nation building, it stands on this restitution principle. First, the citizenship policy that Estonia decided to give citizenship or restore the citizenship for those people who had the citizenship before Soviet occupation, and of course all their children and grandchildren, they got automatically Estonian citizenship, as was the previous citizenship law. All the others who moved to Estonia during the Soviet time, they had to apply the Estonian citizenship, basically make through the naturalization process. Then another dimension here is integration, because what Soviet regime did, it very successfully kind of integrated, or I would say even assimilated, all the other ethnicities into Russian language community, but Estonian community remained separate, and this kind of segregation, the roots go back to the Soviet ethnic policies. And also language policy, because Estonian language is the key identity marker for Estonians, and being a language which is spoken by 1 million people in the world, then the preservation and protection of the language has been also a very crucial element of Estonian nation building. So probably in Ireland you understand this very well, considering what's going on with the Irish language. So that if you have your own state, then you're able to protect your language. So therefore, Estonia also did not go on with this kind of bilingual system, but Estonian official state language is Estonian language. And all those processes, they have their certain impact on Estonian community, as well on Russian-speaking community, and also how they perceived these processes. On one hand, yes, we can say that there is something which is very clearly post-Soviet legacy. We have this kind of economic transformation from planned economy to market economy. Also, this kind of democratization processes. But at the same time, we also have here this kind of decolonization processes that take place in this process. And this nation-building element is very much part of this decolonization. You have your own agency to preserve your own culture, your identity, and not to be overwhelmed by bigger ethnic groups or cultures. Very briefly, to give you how this study was made, I'm not going to bother you with all the details because probably that's the most boring part, the methods. But basically, what our research project is analyzing, it is observing the identity discourses presented by the elite and also by the masses. And this is then measured or analyzed from different sources. They are taken from exactly from the same year, and there are then is taken every 5 years interval to observe then how this change is taking place. And what we have then observed or analyzed are political speeches which present the elite discourse, also history textbooks which preserve this kind of elite discourse, but very directly affecting the future generation. Then newspapers, and here on one hand editorial opinions which are also elite discourse, but also the readers' letters to editorial report, so that which is representing the mass discourse. Then novels, which is this kind of literature, elite or cultural elite discourse, and also movies, so that there's two different this kind of cultural elite representations. And of course, not all that has been produced in 1995 is analyzed because that would be too much, but there is made this kind of selection based on the most popular or most broadly spread then speeches or novels or movies. And then what we are doing, we are analyzing or trying to figure out what are the most frequent these identity markers in this discourse presented in these different domains. And then we aggregate those different identity markers and then try to come up with some certain pattern. And then this what pattern came out from the 1995 discourse. This is also what I'm going to present in this talk. Okay, so at first we'll present Estonians or Estonian language discourse, and after that discourse in Russian by Estonian Russians. Of course, there is certain shortage because not everything can be obtained from Russian-speaking community because there were no Estonian Russian films made. So therefore, some data is not so overwhelming or the comprehensive as it is in the case of Estonian data. But still, I think it gives certain indications. So basically, we managed to then aggregate 5 these major categories. And of course, in 1995, the independence, restoration of independence, that was the most important discourse for Estonians. So that this was something that was desired, that was this kind of loss of independence was regretted. Many people had suffered. Basically, almost all families had some terrible stories from the Stalinist repressions when the independence or sovereignty was destroyed by the Soviets. And therefore, this kind of restoration of independence was very, very essential. And therefore, it's also not too much strange that all these symbols related to the Estonian nation, national tricolor, coat of arms, national flower, national costumes, so that they all had this kind of very strong positive connotation in the discourse. Then another very dominant element, which also was positively assessed or presented, is the question of freedom. So that being yourself, having your own will, how to organize your society, what kind of course to take, what kind of reforms to make, and then also this kind of freedom enthusiasm was very much that pushed a lot of reforms in Estonia made in early 90s. And as already mentioned earlier, then Estonian language, which is a key identity marker for Estonians, it also was very positively presented. Then a little bit mixed feelings or this kind of positive and negative framing was presented to Estonian size, because Estonia is a very small country. We have 1.3 million population in total, and there is this question: how do we handle, how we can preserve our independence, our freedom, and that has been this kind of probably the negative part of this framing. But on the other hand, this small stateness, it also has been presented as something very positive, because this has been our advantage to make through quickly different kind of reforms. And Estonian this transformation process is considered as quite successful case. And this one advantage has been that we have been small. We could very quickly test if some kind of reform went extremely wrong direction, then it was possible to change or correct this. So that in that sense, this smallness also has been advantage. Then the Baltic framing, this also has been positive and negative. So the positive in that sense that together with Latvians and Lithuanians, we share the same destiny. We were occupied by the Soviet Union, presenting ourselves as how to restore independence. That has been the positive element. But at the same time, it also became counterproductive to Estonian, for example, foreign policy goals, because we wanted to become the members of the EU and NATO, and very often we were seen as a triplets, so that it was considered that if Estonia did something, then definitely Latvia and Lithuania do the same thing, even though actually we had quite different reform paths. Estonia was much faster in reforming, and we were doing in that sense better in many aspects, but it was perceived that this kind of Latvian and Lithuanian slower reforms are also undermining our efforts internationally. So therefore, there was also this negative connotations. And in the case of the Russian speakers, on one hand, they were seen as the colonizers or someone who was the legacy from the Soviet occupation. But on the other hand, it was also seen as a community who can help mediating us with Russia. Also, the question how we can increase the loyalty among the Russian speakers, so that on one hand as a security threat, on the other hand also as a source of potential. Then another big theme is related to democracy, and it was very explicitly this kind of very strong aspiration toward democratization, also coming from the Soviet Union, totalitarian regime. Then of course this kind of democracy as a opposite phenomenon, that's one thing, but also this kind of very strong will to have democratic institutions, and this kind of hope that our government is efficient, but of course there has been this kind of up and down, so that on one hand this kind of small nation requires efficient also in this kind of budgetal terms, efficient government. On the other hand, there has been this kind of fear that not all public funds are going with the right direction, or there is too much bureaucracy that can be diminished. Basically something which still is in agenda even today. And where there has been very clearly negative framing is related to the role what political elite is doing, so that there's a lack of trust towards this political elite. Also in the 90s there was very high corruption in Estonia, which is also very common for the post-Soviet societies. Of course today it's not anymore the question, but in the 90s it was one very, very central question. So that it was very clearly understood where we are, and we don't want to be in this kind of sloppy democracy, but this kind of idealized understanding of democracy was there. And then this kind of ideal came also from the Nordic countries, that has been always this kind of aspiration for us. Then in the question of values, Estonian values in the 90s were rather conservative or traditional, so that it was very much referring to this kind of national symbols, this kind of local folklore elements, because of all this that we want to preserve our identity. And there was also this kind of what is very much related, this kind of political understanding of conservatism is this kind of order and then this kind of aspiration for stability. In the 90s, the crime scenes were very bad in Estonia, so that there was a lot of murdering, there was a lot of different criminal groups were killing each other, and sometimes also people who were not involved were shot and so on. So that this kind of lawless situation was, and therefore in society was this kind of constant aspiration that we need to have more law enforcement, we need to have harsher punishments, and so on and so forth. And very clearly negatively was framed the alcohol or alcoholism, which was very often also associated with this Soviet legacy, that this Soviet lifestyle cultivated this kind of deep alcoholism, and then this came once and again into discourse. When we look at the economy dimension, then here it was, at least on the elite level, was very strong push and very strong positive framing for market economy, liberal market economy. Very often US was brought as this kind of idol for us. But on the mass level, it was more looked at the Nordic model, so that this kind of welfare state was presented as this kind of ideal. But overall, none of them was this kind of Soviet nostalgic, or that we would like to have this Soviet type of system or preservation of this kind of system. Also, Estonian society has not been very hierarchical. We don't have our own nobility and then so on. So therefore, this kind of class hierarchy was seen rather negative part. But at the same time, if someone was able to build up him or herself, so that this kind of entrepreneurial people, they were praised in this discourse, so that not to have this kind of class-based society, but rather this kind of self-made man or woman. And about the youth, that was also quite interesting framing. So that on one hand, it was this kind of understanding that the younger generation, they know better what to do, how to do, and this they are this kind of future for our society. At the same time, there was also this kind of feeling that young people, they are lazy, they don't want to work enough as we used to do. So that this kind of, as we say in Estonian, we like to suffer, so that they don't like to suffer. So that this kind of framing, which was this kind of negative connotation. And when we look this kind of otherization, then it's kind of clearly positive elements were related to the West. Estonia was very actively trying to integrate to the Western institutions, and Northern Europe, so Scandinavia, Finland, particularly, whereas this kind of aspiration where we would like to become, Estonia wanted to become a Nordic country as well. And negative ones were clearly related to Russia and Germany, mainly due to the historical reasons. And when we look then this historical others presented, then there this kind of Germans even became less important, and the Soviet Union was particularly dominant negative other, and also thereby Russia. But this kind of about this kind of past self, the interwar Estonia, there these feelings were mixed. So that on one hand, yes, this independence that was seen as something positive, but as much also there was the collapse of democracy. That was again something that was seen as negative, and that was not this kind of aspiration that we wanted to become. Now, speaking about Russian-speaking community, then here we can see also that they were also speaking quite a lot about democracy, rule of law, so that in that sense we can see similarities with Estonians. Though, of course, the way maybe how this democracy was understood was slightly different, so that there was still some kind of Soviet understanding of democracy, people's will, and so on. That was part of that. Then also the protection of human rights, which of course meant that the protection of Russians' rights, so Russian speakers' rights. So that this is also something characteristic that when this discourse is about the human rights, then we speak about the rights of Russian speakers. And the primary source of that was related then to Estonian policies that many of the Russian speakers, they had to make through the naturalization process, so that they had to learn Estonian to some level to get Estonian citizenship, and that was perceived as discrimination. And of course, Russian government was also very heavily backing up, saying that if you are asked to learn Estonian language, then this is something what is discrimination of your community, and that's why it's also not surprising that Estonian authorities or this citizenship policy that was seen primarily negatively in Russian speakers community. Not about Estonians. The understanding of Estonians was vaguely, so that it's positive, negative, not so explicitly negative, but about the Estonian authorities or Estonian political elite was very clearly negative. And there was a lot of this kind of debates, what are the best solutions, because some of them took Russian citizenship, because that was something that was much easier to obtain. Others made the effort, learned the language, and took Estonian citizenship. Also to question how the education should be in Estonia, because the Estonian government wanted to push more Estonian language education. This again was perceived as a violation of human rights. And also then, what does it mean, the integration? And then also in the 90s, the integration from Estonian side was rather perceived that Russian speakers learn Estonian and then they are integrated, which basically created the situation that the Russian speakers were integrating with each other in Estonian language courses, and they did not so much get in touch with Estonians. So that this changed only a decade later when this integration was reconceptualized in Estonia. Then about Estonian Russophones, so that how they see themselves, then it's also, we can see that they positively subscribe to their Russian-speaking community in Estonian. Also, they made the difference between Russian culture in Estonia and the Russian culture in Russia. And about this Russian culture in Russia, then this attitude was mixed. They saw that the roots come from there, but they already started to conceptualize themselves as some different community. And also what is quite characteristics, which to me it was surprising that already then this kind of traditional family values came out from Russian speaking community, which was not so common or so explicitly one way understandable in Estonian discourse, but in the context of Russian speaking community it was. And this is also that this kind of service in the later decades, where we can see that the Russian speaking community is much more conservative in these questions. Then the attachment to Estonia, it's more related to this kind of geography. So that Estonian territory, Estonian nature, so that this is something what is clearly positively framed. Estonian independence is seen positively, but actually this discourse comes through only from the textbooks. And with the textbooks, the issue is that this is actually the Estonians wrote the textbooks in Russian for this community. So therefore, it is not explicitly Russian-speaking created discourse, but this was the discourse that affected at least the younger generation. This is what we can also see, that there is a younger generation clearly more integrated and then having a stronger attachment to Estonia than the older generation. And they also bring out this kind of understanding of united Estonia, so that this is also something very positive. They think that this Estonians and the Russians, they all should live together happily, which is all definitely very nice understanding, but it is presented in the way how it was during the Soviet time. And then I think here is this kind of lack of understanding how it was during the Soviet time for Estonians. How it was for the Russians, you could easily handle with Russian language everywhere, and didn't have to bother with learning Estonian and so on. And then their understanding that united Estonia should be something similar, and here is this very clear the clashing point with Estonia. In economic questions, in Russian-speaking community, there was much more this kind of class inequality question or this kind of concerns, and also because due to these language issues and then this monolingualism in Russian-speaking community, they very often lost the jobs. They were not able to move away from certain districts where they lived, and therefore this kind of socio-economic aspects affected them much more. Also, this economic reform, so that they constantly felt that they kind of suffer more than Estonians do. And the question of the other, they didn't have very clear, explicit, positive hero towards whom self was compared. There were mixed feelings about Russia. On one hand, Russia was seen something positive, particularly in the cultural terms. On the other hand, also this was happening in the 90s in Russia, it was seen negatively. About the West, the same thing. This kind of Estonians were very clearly West-oriented, the Russian speakers much less. And also the attitude towards Estonians. Again, this kind of overall, it wasn't this kind of strong negative feelings towards Estonians, but it was sometimes overlapped with these government policies, and then there was seen this kind of Estonian nationalism is something that comes out from Estonians as well. And when we speak about the historical others, then here we can see also clear differences that World War II and victory in this war, which is very, very positively presented in this community. About the Soviet Union, it's more mixed because they also acknowledge the Stalinist repressions, but definitely much more positive than Estonians. And this kind of ideal, what they present is the Russians, pre-war Russian community in Estonia, or the Baltic Russians. Though, of course, probably also this understanding how this community existed in this pre-war Estonia was also slightly different how they thought, but that was this kind of identity that they want to obtain. So very briefly for conclusions, I understand that there is time pressure. Then basically what we can see that there is a clearly different expectation. So that when Estonian community was building up this preservation of your own culture, you are aiming to restore your agency in political process, in the global terms, then these were not the concerns for Russian-speaking community. But what they were seeking, the Russian-speaking community, was that who they are. They were in the completely new environment. Their role was changed. When before it was this kind of all Soviet Union was perceived as one great homeland, and they could go wherever they want. Now they suddenly were in new environment where there were some kind of requirements presented to them. Also, this kind of advantages that they used to have in the Soviet system, Soviet time, they lost these advantages, and that also created this kind of feel of loss, and then this kind of traumatic feelings even. And then that's where there is a very clear mirror what we can see between Estonians and Russians. But at the same time, there's also certain overlaps. And at least based on discourse, we can say that both communities were pro-democracy. Neither community was saying that, yes, we would like to have this kind of one great leader who leads us. And in that sense, definitely a ground for common statehood. And also the 90s political elite, this kind of different political scandals, corruption cases, and then so on, so that it was by both communities presented as something negative and then something that they would like to get rid of. Yeah, I think I will stop here and we can continue later with questions.
So, I'll take one of the microphones, and if anyone has any questions, I'll bring the microphone to you. Yeah. Let me just.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I really enjoyed it. Two questions. One, when you spoke about the other, you didn't mention Finland. To what extent? I know Finland sometimes sees itself as a big brother, and I'd be interested in that. And the other aspect of the other is within Russia, obviously there are people speaking similar languages. Is there any kind of identity between Estonians and some of the minorities within Russia who speak Finno-Ugric languages? But the most important set of questions is obviously how relations between Russian speakers and Estonians is developing. Is it developing in a positive way, or is the fact that after the Ukrainian war in Ukraine, is there more fear among the Estonian community of the Russians within their midst, in particular having a city like Narva, which is very poor and 90% Russian speaking right on the Russian border, and that this is a really risk for the future in Estonia? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for these questions. I think they're both very, very good ones. In this data, Finland was not brought out separately, but certainly it's part of this Northern Europe or Nordic aspiration. And here we have Finland and Sweden, actually both were seen, not so much Denmark or Norway, but Finland and Sweden, yes. So they have been, and certainly they have in the 90s they helped quite a lot Estonia. They were brought as a kind of example, and even today, I think in some cases we compare how we are doing in comparison to Finland, so that it's still there. About the Finno-Ugric nations in Russia, in the 90s discourse, they did not appear, so that at least based on our methodology, they did not appear so predominant that they ended up in this final data. But as much I can say, what is this overall today, this attitude? Yes, we have different organizations who try to promote the Finno-Ugrian communities and their language. It's possible in our university to learn those languages, and of course they are also seen by Russian government as threat for Russian sovereignty, and then that's why it's also undermines this cooperation what we have. But certainly this Finno-Ugrian element is very, very important for Estonians. Now the second question about the impact of Ukrainian war and then what's the situation between Estonians and then Russian speakers. I would say that first, the Russian-speaking community is not so homogeneous. And just last week came out that the new integration monitoring. We are releasing it every second year, where basically over 50% or close to 50% are clearly integrated in Estonian society. Then something around 20% are in this kind of limbo. They manage quite successfully in Estonian society, but they are not fully integrated yet. And then the rest are the ones which are isolated from Estonian society. So that in that sense, this community is not homogeneous. And particularly after the Russian full-scale invasion to Ukraine, then we can see clearly this kind of disputes and fragmentations in this community even further, because some of them are ethnic Ukrainians and they have very strong affiliation towards the Ukrainian culture, even though maybe they don't speak any more Ukrainian language, but they still feel Ukrainian. And also younger generation is much more pro-Ukraine in this question than the older one. And yes, so that there is certain discourses where some Russian speakers said that, oh, now they do everything for the Ukrainians, but they didn't do anything for us, so that why they are not taking care of us, why they so much bother of Ukrainians. But at the same time, they do not dare to speak this very public. So that it's not so visible, but there are, yes, certain some kind of communities where they are. Plus, of course, I'm quite sure that FSP also kind of gives full into this kind of discourses. But I wouldn't say that this represents really this overall Russian-speaking community.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you for your talk. Really appreciate it. And I have two questions actually in the spirit of the previous person. The first one is kind of on your discourse analysis within Estonian society in particular, or Estonian national discourses. Can you elaborate a bit more on the dynamic between top-down versus bottom-up conversations, so more government-led national discourses versus something that seemed to be happening at a more local level, and then the government maybe responding to that? And then my second question is, again, on Estonian national discourse, and I was wondering if you came across this at all or considered this, Estonian national discourse on the Russian Empire versus the Soviet Union and the Estonian national experience under those two regimes.
Okay, yeah. Again, thank you for these questions. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to completely cut this elite and the masses discourse, but probably in the context of the elite discourse. Already by the nature, so that this kind of independence, security, and then these questions were much more presented. In the case of masses, there were, as already pointed out, one thing was this welfare state, which was not so notable in elite discourse. And sometimes it was even negatively framed, saying that we are not able to do this thing, so that no point to push, or we first have to make ourselves rich through this kind of very liberal economy, and then we can start to think about this Nordic type of welfare state. And of course, another thing was related to all this corruption and then the negative framing of political elite. But there, I would say that it's also a little bit mixed, because, for example, in the president's speech, this kind of condemning corruption or political elite who is abusing the power or who is dealing with some kind of political games instead of really pushing forward this was also coming out. But certainly you could observe these discourses from these letters to the editorial board, or sometimes also actually this editors, so that they also criticize this. So that in that sense, it's not so explicitly coming elite masses, but certainly it comes more from there. And also what probably from the masses came out more was, or this probably the difference came out was that this attitude towards the West, where among political elite it was very clearly positively framed, whereas from the masses it was more, it came out here and there that yes, the West has betrayed us in the Second World War, or they don't see us as equal, and then this also came out from this kind of from the novels and then from the movies, so that a little bit there as well. But this kind of hierarchy that was perceived by population, that gave probably was said, unlike political elite at least. And the second question,
I believe it was it the difference?
Yes, these two empires. In the 90s, this differentiation was not so strong. I think this Soviet Union was still because it came out much more frequently than the Russian Empire itself. So that's probably the biggest differentiation. But it was very strongly all lumped together with one Russia. In the later decades, we can see that this differentiation or more nuanced understanding appears. But in the 90s, it was this kind of Russia versus Sweden. Sweden has been perceived as a very positive empire when Estonia was ruled by Sweden, which is also a little bit simplified because this not everything was excellent during the Swedish Empire either. But this was clearly in the 90s. So that I wouldn't say that there's probably it's just a question of frequency than the attitude itself.
Suur tänu teie loengu eest ja head emakeelepäeva. I was wondering about like multi-generational Estonian immigrant communities have a very, very strong like identity and identify very strongly with Estonian culture and the country itself. And I was wondering how much awareness like like Homo Estonians have of these outside cultures that have sort of developed their own way of life and stuff. Just their kodueestlased.
Kodu- ja väliseestlased. Yes, this actually this was how to say it was a little bit surprising because I expected myself to see much more this in these discourses. Maybe if we would take some earlier years, 92, 93, maybe then it would be more notable. Maybe for 95, it already was a little bit late for recording this thing. But definitely there has been this debate, actually, I think from both communities, so that who is the traitor and who is the true Estonian. Because also among these väliseestlased, emigre Estonians, there was this kind of understanding that you were Sovietized and we were the one who preserved Estonian culture, even though we were not in Estonia. And then the kodueestlased, those who stayed in Estonia, they said, but we were the one who kept alive despite this Soviet occupation. And yes, these were these questions certainly, or these debates, but with our data, it did not come out in this way. Also, what we could see in the 90s, there were these emigrant Estonians who returned, and they got very quickly making very perfect careers. Sometimes there were also this kind of people who just were hunting cheap fame and not having maybe the best skills for that. And some people who contributed a lot and then did a lot for Estonian state. So that this also had time to time created certain upheavals. But at least with this methodology, what we had, it wasn't so significant that it became as one of these final topics. But yeah, it's definitely very, very interesting theme to study as well. And I think that if you get some particular archive materials where these disputes and then discussions are available, then this is, I think, certainly very rich topic to study.
Hello, thank you for coming. It was really interesting. I suppose what I would be interested in is Estonia is quite known for having an e-society and being very much into e-voting, the most in the world. And you've seen other countries become quite paranoid about using digital technology in voting and just in general social media. And we've seen, importantly, especially in regards to Estonia, how Russia has meddled in countries regarding their data and their social media and allegedly voting. I suppose, is there evidence of Russia doing that in any way in meddling in Estonia? And what would the sentiment of the various different groups in Estonia be towards this e-society and this e-voting system that's been so popular?
Yeah, that's also a very, very, very good question. I think it all started from this kind of efficiency. And then it was sold to people that this is much more efficient. It's much cheaper when we have e-government. And I think that was the starting point. And that's also this 90s discourse showed that people were willing to have more efficient government. And then they started to use these different e-services. They realized that, oh, yes, this is efficient, so that you don't have to go to some kind of office and then sit hours and hours to get your paperwork done. You just go to internet, and with few minutes everything is done, no problem. And I think that's very positive experience created also the trust, because the system was working, and efficient. It also decreased the corruption because you didn't have anymore this individual who had this kind of possibility to say that, okay, if you give me some money, then we can push the things faster. So that these were all these positive qualities, and also with the elections, basically there have been two parties, but during different times when they have opposed these e-elections and who have questioned this. But all the other parties have been behind this, and it's also not surprised then if a party who actively campaigns against is e-voting, then these voters are also not voting, or they are not giving their e-vote. They go to the polling station, And the first party was this kind of Estonian-Russian mixed party, center party. They were several elections saying that no, we don't trust, and then we can say that yes, this party has been blamed the most that Russia has tried to use them, but it was rather that against the system than not for the system. And during the last elections, there have been this National Radical Party, populist. So basically, in both cases, we can say it's a very populist discourse because also the center party was much more populist at the time when they used this thing. So that this is something that is trying to get the votes from people who are disappointed for various reasons, then to show that yes, they are victims because they are not getting votes through this e-voting. And I think that during the last elections, particularly this National Radical Party, they really tried to challenge this overall outcome, because until there were votes came in from the polling stations, they were doing pretty well. They really hoped that they can form a government. And then when these e-votes came in, then they overwhelmingly lost. And then they said that no, this is not fair, and then they really tried to basically going to the Supreme Court to demand that these elections will be cancelled, or those votes will be cancelled. And now they are making all the other tricks in the parliament to really host these extraordinary elections or snap elections.
And thank you again to Dr. Pääbo. And just to say, next week, the lecture series continues, same time, same place. It's Beatrice Skiratu from DCU is going to be talking about Romania and the refugee crisis during the Cold War. So we'll have to see you there. And thank you again.